A very good morning to you. I hope you may have had a chance to read chapter 26 of 1 Samuel, which is another instance when David is being pursued by Saul. The Ziphites, who were people who lived in the valley or the desert wilderness of Ziph, and they had betrayed David's whereabouts before in chapter 23, and they betray it again to Saul, and Saul pursues David, and they come to a place where David is up in the hills and Saul is in the valley and asleep at night, and they creep into the tent, David and one of his men, Abishai, and Abishai wants to kill Saul and David doesn't. And in verse 10 it says, "As the Lord lives, the Lord will smite him, or his day will come to die, or he shall go down into battle and perish. The Lord forbid that I should put forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. But now take the spear that is at his head and the jar of water, and let us go." So they take the spear and the jar of water, which is unmistakably Saul's, and then there is a confrontation, and David shows the spear and the jar of water to Saul and says a second time to him, "I could have killed you. You were in my hands and I didn't." And this is a very important principle. We've spoken of it before, but the scripture chooses to give us two almost mirror image accounts of David's having Saul in his hands, and he doesn't take into his own hands the bringing about of what God has promised him. And we must be very careful about this. We have met this, Terry and I, in our experience, people who know God has put a call on their lives, and or they believe they have, and they go about getting to the place where God has told them he is going to take them by devious means, and they haven't got the patience that David had to wait for God's timing, and there's no blessing in that. Maybe David had a promise from God, and it took about, I think when I worked it out at one point, it's coming up to about 15 years between when he was anointed king and when he became king. It's a long time that he waits for God's promise to be brought about, and he does not engineer it himself. He waits for God to do it. As he said here, "The Lord will smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he'll go down into battle and perish. God forbid that I should put forth my hand against the Lord's anointed." It's a very important principle, because it shows even in circumstances that seem adverse to us. And David's circumstances certainly were adverse. Everywhere he went, he was chased by Saul. People gave him away. And in fact, it says at the beginning of the next chapter, David said in his heart, "I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul." There were moments in this chasing and being chased when he thought, when is it ever going to happen? He's going to catch up with me one of these days and kill me. But most of the time, he trusted the Lord, and he knew. And he says in chapter 26, verse 23, "The Lord rewards every man for his righteousness and his faithfulness. For the Lord gave you into my hand today, and I would not put forth my hand against the Lord's anointed. Behold, as your life was precious this day in my sight, so may my life be precious in the sight of the Lord, and may he deliver me out of all tribulation." we have to, we really do have to trust God that his timing for everything is right. That we follow his ways, we stick to his principles, even when doing it differently would speed up the process. Because in all of this, God was teaching David how to be a king. He was teaching David how to lead this band of men, how to handle each situation with wisdom and honesty and integrity. He is teaching him how to deal with people who won't help him, like he dealt with Nabal and Abigail. He's teaching him how to deal with treacherous groups of people he comes across, and how to lead the men. He's teaching him. And we mustn't short-circuit God's ways in our lives. And we need to honour those who are in the ministry. We need to honour those who are over us in the ministry, those who are our leaders, like Saul. Saul was David's king, and David, to the best of his ability, honoured Saul. He did not lead a rebellion. He did not gather people against Saul. He did not go out to try and find Saul and confront him. He did not. He did not try and get Jonathan to join his band. There were a lot of things that David could have done that he did not do. When he was with the Philistines, which we're going to come up to shortly, when he was with the Philistines, he did not go with the Philistine raiding parties and fight his own people. He did not do that. He avoided it. He found a way to avoid it. Because he walked a life of integrity. So this wonderful book we have teaches us the principles by which our life should be run and lived. And we live those principles and let God look after the outcome. Let God guide the path. Very often the only bit of the path that he gives us and shows us is the next step. He may have told us what the ultimate is going to be, but on that journey to the ultimate, we only go one step at a time. And with David, it was the same. He found peace and quiet when he escaped from Saul's presence until the next time that Saul chased after him. So that's my thought for the day, is this thought that we have to trust God. In the most difficult of circumstances, we have to trust God. And we have to do things his way. And we have to leave the outcome and the outworking of the path we're on to him. So have a great day. God bless you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.